A 4-year-old homeless girl sees a millionaire being violently threatened by a cruel man. But 5 minutes later, she does something that shocks everyone. Watch until the end. You won't regret it. Comment what you think will happen. Your opinion is very important, and subscribe to my channel to support my work. Your help is very important. The December sun beat down on the asphalt of Harmony Creek, a small town in upstate New York, as Isabella ran for the 3rd time that morning to Joe's bakery. At 4 years old, she knew every corner of that town, every alley where she could hide when someone shooed her away, every place where she could find leftover food. Her bare feet were full of calluses, and her curly hair, tangled from neglect, bounced as she approached the window. The faded blue dress she had been wearing for weeks was torn on the side, but Isabella didn't care. Her only concern was getting a few pieces of bread that Joe sometimes set aside for her. "Please, Mr. Joe," she whispered, pressing her dirty little face against the glass. "Just a little piece today." The baker, a 60-year-old man with a prominent belly and a soft heart, looked at the girl and sighed. It wasn't the first time Isabella had appeared there, and he knew it probably wouldn't be the last. He grabbed 2 rolls that were set aside and handed them to her through the door. "Here you go, kiddo. But don't hang around here too long. Mrs. Higgins doesn't like seeing street kids in front of her store." Isabella took the rolls, her little eyes shining with gratitude, and ran off. She knew Mrs. Higgins well, the bakery's neighbor who always chased her away with a broom when she saw her nearby. The girl hid behind a tree in the town square and began to eat slowly, savoring each piece as if it were the most special meal in the world. As she ate, her ears picked up raised voices coming from the other side of the square. It was an argument, and Isabella, curious as any child, quietly approached to see what was happening. 2 men were standing in front of a furniture store. One of them was tall and well-dressed, with graying hair and an expression of despair on his face. The other was shorter, but much more robust, with thick arms and a scar that cut across his right eyebrow. "Victor, you owe me $200,000, said the robust man, his voice full of threat. "It's been 3 years since you signed those papers. The deadline is over." "Ozzy, I swear I don't understand," replied the other, running his hands through his hair. "I never borrowed that money. There must be some mistake." "Mistake?" Ozzy laughed sinisterly. "Here's your signature. Here are the documents. You took the money and now you're going to pay, with interest." Isabella watched, hidden behind a parked car. Even though she was very young, she could sense that something terrible was about to happen. The man named Victor seemed desperate, sweating a lot, even though it was still morning. "Ozzy, please, give me a few more days," Victor pleaded. "I'll find a lawyer. I'll find out what happened, but I swear on my mother's memory that I never signed those papers." "A few days?" Ozzy took a threatening step towards Victor. "You've had 3 years, and now you come to me with this talk about not signing? Do you think I'm an idiot?" The tension in the air was palpable. Isabella held the rest of the bread tightly in her small hands, unable to take her eyes off the scene. There was something in the despair of the well-dressed man that touched her deeply. Maybe it was because she recognized that expression of helplessness, the same one she saw in the mirrors of public restrooms when she managed to look at herself. "Ozzy, I have the factory, I have the house, I can give something as collateral," Victor tried, his voice getting weaker. "Collateral?" Ozzy laughed again, a sound that made Isabella shiver. "The only collateral I want is my money. And if you can't get it together by next week—" Ozzy didn't finish the sentence, but raised his right hand, clenching it into a fist. The threat was clear. Victor recoiled instinctively, leaning his back against the wall of his own store. It was at that moment that something inexplicable happened inside Isabella. Seeing that man cornered, remembering all the times she herself had felt small and helpless, a strange force took over her little muscles. Without thinking twice, she ran out from behind the car and threw herself in front of Ozzy, hugging his thick legs with all the strength her thin little arms could muster. "Don't hurt the nice man!" she shouted, looking up with her big, determined eyes. "He's a good guy. You can't hurt good people." The silence that followed was absolute. Ozzy was so surprised that for a moment he didn't know how to react. Victor, still leaning against the wall, stared at the surreal scene with his mouth open. A street kid, who he had never seen before, was defending him from a dangerous man. "What the heck?" Ozzy muttered, trying to disentangle himself from Isabella's little arms, but without using violence. "Get out of here, kid! This isn't your problem." "It is!" Isabella shouted, tightening her hug even more. "You're too big, and he's a good guy." "You can't hurt him." Ozzy looked at Victor over Isabella's head, his expression a mixture of irritation and confusion. He had never encountered a situation like that. "1 week, Victor," he said finally, taking a step back and making Isabella stumble. 7 days for you to get my money, and next time leave your daughter at home." She's not my daughter," Victor murmured, still in shock. Ozzy stopped and looked again at Isabella, who was now standing between the two men, small but defiant. "Isn't she? Then who is she?" he asked. Victor looked at Isabella, really seeing her for the first time. The dirty hair, the torn clothes, the bare feet. She was clearly a street child. I don't know," he admitted. Ozzy shook his head with contempt. 7 days, he repeated, walking away. "And if you don't pay, you'll find out that there are worse things than losing money." With those threatening words, he turned and walked away across the square, leaving Victor and Isabella alone in front of the furniture store. Victor Collins stood still for long minutes, looking at the girl who had just defended him in a way that no adult had ever done. Isabella, in turn, stared at him with those big, dark eyes, still holding firmly to the piece of bread she had won at the bakery. "Why did you do that?" he finally asked, crouching down to be at the child's level. Isabella shrugged, a gesture that seemed too old for her 4 years. "He was going to hurt you. I don't like it when someone hurts good people," she replied, nibbling the bread carefully. "How do you know I'm a good guy?" Victor insisted, genuinely curious. "Your eyes aren't mean," Isabella said simply. "Mean people have different eyes. Like that big man." The simplicity of the answer touched Victor in a way he didn't expect. At 52 years old, owner of a furniture factory that employed half the town, he had become accustomed to the complexities of adult life, where people rarely said what they really thought. And there was a child, hungry and abandoned, offering him a crystalline perspective on goodness. "What's your name?" he asked. "Isabella." "And where do you live, Isabella?" The girl pointed vaguely in the direction of the square. "Over there. There's a place under the bridge where it doesn't rain much." Victor's heart tightened. Under the bridge. A 4-year-old child sleeping under a bridge. "And your family? Your parents?" Isabella shook her head, her tangled curls dancing. "I don't have any. Just me." Victor felt a lump in his throat. During all those years building his company, focused on profits and expansion, he had forgotten that there were children like Isabella right under his nose. "Do you want to come with me?" he asked impulsively. "My wife makes a very tasty lunch." Isabella's eyes lit up, but then filled with distrust. "Why? You don't know me. You helped me when I needed it. Now I want to help you." Isabella considered the proposal for a few seconds, thoughtfully chewing her bread. "Okay," she said finally, "but if you're mean, I'll run away." Victor couldn't help but smile. It was the first time he had smiled since Ozzy had appeared with those threats a week ago. "Deal," he said, extending his hand to her. Isabella took Victor's hand with her small, dirty hand, and the two walked together through the streets of Harmony Creek. Victor's house was in a more upscale neighborhood of the town, with paved streets and large houses with well-kept gardens. When they arrived in front of an iron gate painted blue, Isabella stopped and looked impressed at the 2-story house with a flowered balcony. "You really live here?" she asked, open-mouthed. "I do," replied Victor, opening the gate. "Come on." They climbed the steps of the porch, and Victor hesitated before opening the door. How would he explain to Carol that he had brought a street child home? His wife had been so fragile lately, barely leaving the room. But there was no turning back. He opened the door and called, "Carol, I'm home!" A weak voice answered from somewhere in the house. "I'm in the kitchen." Victor guided Isabella through the spacious living room, decorated with furniture that he himself manufactured, until they reached the kitchen. Carol was sitting at the table, distractedly stirring a cup of coffee, still in her dressing gown, despite it being midday. Carol Collins, at 52 years old, was a woman who had once been vibrant and full of life, but the last 5 years had taken their toll. After discovering that she could not have children due to medical complications, she had plunged into a deep sadness that seemed to have no end. When she looked up and saw Isabella, her face transformed completely. The empty expression gave way to something Victor hadn't seen in years: genuine interest. "Who is this beautiful girl?" asked Carol, getting up from her chair. "This is Isabella," Victor explained carefully. "She helped me this morning. I thought I'd invite her for lunch." Carol approached Isabella, who instinctively hid behind Victor. "Hello, Isabella," said Carol, with a softer voice than she had used in months. "Do you like spaghetti with tomato sauce?" Isabella peeked out from behind Victor. "I do," she said timidly. "But it's been a long time since I ate it." Something broke in Carol's heart at that moment. Without saying a word, she went to the stove and started heating water in a pot. "Victor," she said, "take Isabella to wash up while I prepare lunch." It was the first time in months that Carol had shown initiative for anything. Victor took Isabella to the downstairs bathroom and helped her wash up. The water that ran down the drain was almost brown from so much accumulated dirt. When they returned to the kitchen, the smell of homemade tomato sauce filled the air. Carol had set the table with 3 plates and had even prepared a glass of orange juice, especially for Isabella. During lunch, something magical happened. Isabella, initially shy, began to tell small stories about her life on the streets. She talked about the dogs that protected her when she slept, about the stars she saw from the bridge, about how she had learned to recognize good people and bad people. Carol listened to every word with total attention, asking questions and smiling, really smiling for the first time since Victor could remember. "Isabella," said Carol when they finished eating, "would you like to take a real bath? I have some dresses that might fit you." Isabella's eyes sparkled. "Really?" "Of course, my dear." While Carol took Isabella upstairs, Victor was alone in the kitchen, processing everything that had happened that day. In a few hours, his life had changed completely. First the threat from Ozzy, then Isabella's courageous gesture, and now seeing his wife smile again. But in the back of his mind, a worry grew. Ozzy had given him only a week to get $200,000, and Victor really had no idea where that debt could have come from. He went to his office and took the folder with the documents that Ozzy had shown. He examined the signature again. It seemed genuine, but he was absolutely sure that he had never signed those papers. The phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. "Hello? Victor, it's me, Danny." It was his younger brother who worked with him at the factory. "Hi, Danny? Man, you disappeared this morning. There was an important meeting with the suppliers." "What happened?" Victor hesitated. How to explain everything to Danny? "I had a problem. I'll tell you later." "What kind of problem? Is the company okay?" "I don't know, Danny. Honestly, I don't know." There was something in his brother's voice that bothered him, but he couldn't identify what. Danny had always been ambitious, always questioning Victor's decisions about the company that their father had left to both of them, but which Victor managed alone. "Well, tell me anything," said Danny. "Oh, and Victor, what is it?" "Be careful who you trust. Sometimes the people closest to us are the ones who can hurt us the most." The call ended, leaving Victor with a strange feeling in his chest. Why had Danny said that exactly today? From upstairs, he heard laughter. Carol and Isabella laughing together. It had been so long since he'd heard Carol laugh that he had almost forgotten how beautiful that sound was. But the happiness of the moment was interrupted by a disturbing discovery. Searching the documents of the alleged debt more carefully, Victor found a second signature that he recognized immediately. It was from someone very close to him, someone who had access to all the company's documents, someone he trusted completely. 3 days had passed since Isabella arrived at the Collins house, and the transformation was visible to anyone who knew the family. Carol had started combing her hair again, dressing properly, and, more importantly, had started smiling again. Isabella was like a ray of sunshine that illuminated every room she passed through. That morning, as Victor prepared to go to the factory, he watched his wife preparing breakfast and humming softly, something she hadn't done in years. Isabella was sitting at the kitchen table, wearing a pink dress that Carol had bought especially for her, her curly hair finally clean and braided into pigtails. "Uncle Victor," said Isabella, chewing on toast with jelly, "can I go to work with you today?" "Work?" Victor laughed. "You're only 4 years old, kiddo. Kids don't work, they play." "But I want to see where you make the pretty furniture," she insisted. "Aunt Carol showed me the living room table and said you made it." "It's very pretty." Carol approached the table with a cup of coffee for her husband. "Why don't you take her, Victor? It might be interesting for the girl to see." Victor hesitated. The factory wasn't exactly a place for children, but seeing the sparkle in Isabella's eyes, he didn't have the heart to refuse. "All right, but you stay close to me the whole time, got it?" "Got it!" Isabella shouted, clapping her hands with joy. An hour later, they arrived at Collins' factory, a large warehouse on the outskirts of town where the noise of the machines constantly echoed. Isabella was fascinated watching the employees cut wood, sand pieces, and assemble furniture with precision. "Look!" she exclaimed, pointing to a jigsaw puzzle that one of the employees had left on a table during their break. "Can I try?" "Sure," said Victor, thinking it would be a good way to keep her occupied while he checked some reports. The puzzle was complex, with more than 500 pieces representing a mountainous landscape. It was the kind of challenge that took adults days to complete. Victor left Isabella there and went to his office to talk to Danny about the week's orders. "What do you mean you brought a kid to the factory?" asked Danny, visibly annoyed. "This is a serious business, Victor, not a playground." "She's quiet, she's not bothering anyone," replied Victor, leafing through some papers. "And Carol is so happy with her at home." "Carol." Danny pronounced his sister-in-law's name with a strange tone. "Don't you think you're exaggerating? Taking a street girl and bringing her home like that, without knowing anything about her. She's just a child who needs help. A child who will leave when? Have you thought about that?" Danny got up from his chair, pacing nervously around the room. "What if she brings problems? What if someone comes looking for her? Danny, what's going on with you? Since when do you care so much about who I bring to my house?" Before Danny could answer, excited shouts coming from the warehouse caught the attention of the two. They ran to see what was happening and found all the employees gathered around the table where Isabella was. "My God," murmured John, the oldest employee. "I've never seen anything like it." The puzzle was complete. All 500 pieces fitted together perfectly, forming the mountainous landscape in impressive detail, and Isabella was sitting in the chair, swinging her little legs and smiling proudly. "Finished, Uncle Victor," she shouted when she saw him. "It was easy. The pieces told me where they wanted to go." "The pieces told you?" asked Victor, still processing what he was seeing. "Not really," Isabella laughed, "but I could see where they fit. Like numbers. Each piece has a number in my head, and I just needed to put the same numbers together." "How long did it take you to do this?" asked John, impressed. "I don't know, not long." "It was 20 minutes, said Mary, the factory secretary. "I timed it because I thought it was funny, a child trying to do such a difficult puzzle, but in 20 minutes she did everything." Victor looked at Isabella with new eyes. There was something special about that girl, something that went far beyond her courage and sweetness. "Isabella," he said, crouching down next to her, "have you always been able to do things like this?" "What things?" "See patterns, numbers, organize complicated things." Isabella thought for a moment. "I think so. When I slept on the street, I counted the stars and could see drawings in them. And when people threw coins on the ground, I could quickly count how many there were, even when there were a lot." "How many coins are here?" asked John, spreading a handful of coins on the table. Isabella looked for 2 seconds. 37. John counted carefully. 37 exact coins. A murmur of admiration ran among the employees. Danny, however, watched everything with a somber expression. "Victor, can I talk to you in private?" he said. The two brothers moved away from the group, and Danny pulled Victor into a more secluded corner. "Are you seeing this?" said Danny in a low voice. "This girl isn't normal." "What do you mean she's not normal? She's intelligent." "Too intelligent. Street kids with skills like that, it attracts attention, Victor. The wrong kind of attention." "What kind of attention?" Danny hesitated, as if he had said more than he should have. "Forget it. I just think you should be careful." That afternoon, back at home, Isabella was playing in the yard while Carol prepared dinner. Victor was in the living room trying once again to understand the debt documents when the phone rang. "Hello?" "Victor." It was Ozzy's voice. "How is our little heroine?" Victor's blood ran cold. "What did you say?" "The girl who hugged me on Tuesday. Isabella, isn't it? Interesting girl. Very interesting. How do you know her name?" "I know a lot, Victor. I know you took her to your house. I know your wife is getting attached. I know you think you've found a little daughter. What do you want?" "The same thing as always, my money. But now I think I've found a way to make sure you pay. If you lay a finger on her—" "Me? I would never hurt a child." Ozzy's voice sounded falsely innocent. "But it turns out I know the story of this girl. I know where she came from. And I know there are people looking for her." "What people?" "People who won't be happy to know that you're playing family with something that belongs to them." The call ended, leaving Victor with the phone in his hand and his heart beating erratically. He ran to the window and looked at the yard, where Isabella continued to play quietly, unaware that her presence had just become much more dangerous. Outside the house, hidden behind a tree, Danny watched everything through a small pair of binoculars. In his free hand he held a cell phone, which he had just used to make a call. "Yeah, she's here," he murmured into the phone. "And it's exactly as you said. The girl has the ability." He heard the answer on the other end of the line and nodded. "Don't worry. I know exactly how to get her out of there without raising suspicion. My brother is already desperate with this debt story. It will be easier than we imagined." Danny put away the phone and the binoculars, took one last look at the house where his sister-in-law had finally smiled again, and walked silently down the street. Inside the house, unaware of the approaching danger, Isabella continued to play, arranging pebbles from the garden into complex patterns that only her extraordinary mind could see. That night, Isabella woke up screaming. Her screams echoed through the silent house, making Victor and Carol run to the guest room where the girl slept. They found her sitting on the bed, shaking violently, with her eyes wide with terror. "Isabella, what's wrong?" asked Carol, sitting on the edge of the bed and pulling the girl into her lap. "It was just a nightmare, honey." "It wasn't a nightmare," sobbed Isabella, clinging to Carol's pajamas. "It was the dark place. The cold place where the children cry." Victor and Carol exchanged worried glances. It was the third time in a week that Isabella had had the same kind of nightmare, always talking about a dark and cold place. "What place is that, Isabella?" asked Victor gently, sitting on the other side of the bed. "I don't know," she murmured, wiping away her tears. "There are children there. Many children, and they're always afraid. And there's a woman in white who isn't good. A woman in white? She says the children need to work, that they can't play, and when they cry..." Isabella trembled again. When they cry, she gets angry. Carol rocked the girl until she fell asleep again, but then spent the rest of the night awake, worried. In the morning, while preparing coffee, she talked to Victor about her fears. "Maybe we should take her to a doctor," said Carol. "These nightmares aren't normal for a 4-year-old. "You're right. I'll make an appointment with Dr. Harrison today." 2 hours later, they were in the waiting room of the doctor's office. Isabella was playing with some toys in the reception area when a nurse in a white uniform passed through the room carrying a clipboard. Isabella's reaction was instantaneous and terrifying. She let out a deafening scream and threw herself under a chair, trembling convulsively. "No! No! The woman in white! She came to get me!" Isabella screamed, trying to make herself even smaller under the chair. The nurse, a woman in her 50s named Patricia, stopped immediately and crouched down. "Calm down, dear. I'm not going to hurt you," she said in a soft voice, but her name made Isabella scream even louder. "Patricia! It's Patricia! She was there! She was in the dark place!" The nurse paled visibly, and Victor noticed that her hands began to tremble. I need to go," Patricia stammered, getting up quickly and leaving the room almost running. It took 20 minutes for Carol to calm Isabella enough to get her out from under the chair. The girl kept murmuring about the dark place and about how Patricia made the children work until they were very tired. Dr. Harrison, a kind man of 60 years, examined Isabella with extra care after the episode in the reception area. "She shows clear signs of psychological trauma," he explained to Victor and Carol. "The memories are fragmented, but they are very real to her. Something terrible happened to this child before you found her." "But what could it have been?" asked Carol. "Based on what she describes, children working, constant fear, a female authority figure, it seems she went through some kind of exploitation situation, possibly child labor." "Child labor? But she's only 4 years old. Unfortunately, there are unscrupulous people who exploit very young children. They are forced to do simple but repetitive tasks for hours. It's more common than we'd like to admit." When they left the doctor's office, Victor was determined to find out more about Isabella's past. He had noticed how the nurse Patricia reacted when Isabella screamed her name, and that couldn't be coincidence. That afternoon, he returned to the office alone. Patricia was organizing files when he arrived. "Excuse me," said Victor, "can we talk about what happened this morning?" "I don't know what you're talking about," replied Patricia, avoiding looking him in the eye. "My daughter recognized you. She screamed your name. It must be a mistake. I've never seen that child before." "Patricia, please, if you know anything about Isabella's past, I need to know. She's with us now. She's safe. But these nightmares are destroying her." The nurse stopped organizing the files and was silent for a long moment. "If I say anything," she said finally, "I could get into trouble. Serious trouble." "What kind of trouble?" "The kind that could ruin me." Patricia looked around nervously. "But that girl, she managed to escape on her own, at 4 years old." "Escape from where?" "From the place she was. It was disguised as an orphanage. Hope House it was called, but it wasn't a normal orphanage." "What was it then?" "It was a place where very young children were forced to do simple manual labor. Sorting seeds, organizing small screws, things like that. Jobs that seemed harmless, but they worked 12, 14 hours a day." Victor felt nauseous. "And you worked there?" "I was a nurse. I took care of the children when they got sick from working so much. But I didn't know at first, I swear. When I found out what was really happening, I tried to leave, but what? They said that if I told anyone anything, I would be accused of complicity, that no one would believe I didn't know." "Where is this place?" It was closed a few months ago. They said it was due to licensing problems, but I think someone started to suspect." "And who was in charge of it?" Patricia hesitated again, looking nervously at the door. A woman named Director Regina. She always wore a white uniform, just like me, and there was a man who took care of security and discipline. What man? Ozzy. Ozzy Mendez. The name hit Victor like a punch in the stomach. Ozzy, the same man who was charging him a false debt, the same man who had threatened his family. Patricia, I need you to tell me everything you know about that place. Everything. I can't. If they find out I talked. They already know where Isabella is, said Victor urgently. Ozzy called me yesterday. He knows she's with us. If you don't help me understand what's happening, that child will be in danger. Patricia closed her eyes, making a difficult decision. All right, but not here. There are too many ears. She scribbled an address on a piece of paper. Meet me tonight at 9 o'clock, and come alone. When Victor arrived home, he found Danny in the living room talking to Carol. His brother was holding Isabella in his arms, and the girl seemed uncomfortable. Hi, Danny, said Victor, surprised to see his brother there at that hour. What are you doing here? I came to visit my favorite sister-in-law and get to know our little guest better, replied Danny with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Uncle Victor, said Isabella, reaching her little arms out to him. Can I get down? Danny put her on the floor, and she ran immediately to Victor, clinging to his legs. She's shy with strangers, explained Carol, but Victor noticed something else in the girl's behavior. She seemed genuinely scared. Danny, can I talk to you on the porch? Asked Victor. The two brothers went outside, leaving Carol and Isabella in the living room. What do you really want here? Asked Victor directly. Wow, such hostility. Can't I visit my own brother? You can, but you never have before. And Isabella seemed uncomfortable with you. Maybe because she knows I'm worried about this whole situation. Victor, have you thought about the legal consequences of having a child at home without proper documentation? What consequences? What if someone comes to claim custody of her? What if they find out you have her illegally? You could be charged with kidnapping. Kidnapping? She was abandoned. Can you prove that? Do you have documents to prove that she has no family? Victor was silent. Danny was right on that point. I know some people in social services, continued Danny. I can arrange to regularize the situation, but it will cost some money. How much money? About 50,000, to speed up the process and ensure there are no problems. It was at that moment that Victor realized something disturbing. $50,000. Added to the $200,000 that Ozzy was charging, it totaled $250,000. Exactly the amount that was in the company's savings account, a reserve that only he and Danny knew about. Danny, he said slowly, how do you know I have 50,000 available? His brother hesitated for a fraction of a second, but it was enough. I just figured you could get that money somehow. That night, as he drove to meet Patricia, Victor couldn't get the expression on Danny's face out of his head. For the first time in his life, he was beginning to distrust his own brother. And deep down, a terrible certainty was beginning to form. Someone very close to him was involved in Isabella's disappearance. Someone who knew all his business dealings, all his accounts, all his movements. Someone who had access to enough documents to forge his signature on bank contracts. The meeting with Patricia took place at the edge of town, in a small diner that stayed open late. The nurse was sitting at a table in the back, nervous, constantly looking over her shoulder. When Victor arrived, she already had a stack of papers in front of her. I brought some things I managed to save before leaving Hope House, she said, pushing the documents to Victor. Lists of children, medical records, some notes I made about what I saw there. Victor leafed through the papers, feeling his stomach turn with each page. There were photos of children between the ages of 2 and 6, all with blank expressions, empty eyes. And in one of the lists, there was the name Isabella Silva, 4 years old, arrived in March. March was only 4 months ago, murmured Victor. That means she was in that place for a short time before escaping. Yes, she was one of the youngest, and also one of the most special. Special how? Isabella had an incredible ability to organize things. Director Regina was fascinated when she discovered that she could separate hundreds of screws by size in a matter of minutes. It took the other children hours to do the same work. That's why they wanted so badly to get her back. Exactly. Isabella was worth 10 normal children. Regina was furious when she found out she had escaped. She mobilized her entire network of contacts to find her. What network of contacts? Patricia hesitated, stirring nervously in her coffee. Hope House didn't operate alone. There were people in various sectors of society who knew what happened there and turned a blind eye in exchange for benefits. What kind of people? Government officials, people from social services, even some merchants in town who bought the products that the children produced. Victor's blood ran cold. Patricia, do you know someone named Danny Collins? The nurse stopped stirring her coffee and looked directly at him. Why are you asking that? He's my brother, and today he offered to resolve the situation with Isabella's documentation through contacts in social services. Your brother? Patricia paled. Victor, your brother appeared several times at Hope House. He brought orders for small furniture that the children assembled. Small tables, small chairs, things that were later sold as handicrafts. The world seemed to collapse on Victor. Danny, his own brother, was involved in that child exploitation network. There's more, continued Patricia. In the weeks before the house closed, your brother came much more frequently. He talked a lot with Regina and Ozzy about a specific child who had escaped. Isabella. Yes, they were desperate to get her back. And Danny said he had a way to get her to come back voluntarily. What way? I don't know the details, but I heard them talking about using someone in the family against you. Someone close that you would protect at all costs. Victor stood up abruptly from the table. I have to go home, now. Victor, be careful. If they find out you know the truth. But he was already running to the car, his heart pounding with fear. Carol and Isabella were alone at home, and Danny knew where they were. When he arrived home 20 minutes later, everything seemed normal. The lights were on. He could hear the television on in the living room. But something was wrong. Very wrong. He quietly entered through the kitchen door and heard voices coming from the living room. One of them was Carol's, but it sounded tense, scared. The other was Danny's. Doesn't have to be difficult, Carol. It's just a matter of paperwork. I'm not signing anything without Victor here, replied Carol with a firm voice, but Victor could perceive the fear behind the words. The girl is sleeping, isn't she? What a shame if she woke up and found out she couldn't stay here anymore. Children are so sensitive to sudden changes. It was a veiled but clear threat. Victor advanced silently through the hallway until he could see the living room. Danny was sitting on the sofa next to Carol, holding some papers, and on the other sofa, Isabella was curled up in a corner, clearly awake and terrified. Danny, said Victor, entering the room. Good to see you're still here. His brother turned around, surprised. Victor, you came back early from your appointment. What are those papers you want Carol to sign? Just some documents to regularize the situation of the girl. As I said this afternoon, I have contacts who can speed up the adoption process. How interesting. And those contacts are the same ones you used at Hope House. The silence that followed was deafening. Danny was motionless, and Carol looked confused from one brother to the other. Hope House? She asked. What place is that? It's the place where Isabella escaped from, said Victor, keeping his eyes fixed on Danny. A place where small children were forced to work 12 hours a day, assembling furniture that my dear brother sold as handicrafts. Danny got up slowly from the sofa. Victor, you don't understand the complete situation. I understand perfectly. You forged my signature to create a false debt with Ozzy. You participated in a scheme to exploit child labor. And now you want to use false documents to gain legal access to Isabella. She doesn't belong to you, exploded Danny, losing his composure. You took her from the street without knowing where she came from. I'm trying to protect the family from a kidnapping lawsuit. You're trying to hand her back to the exploiters. Isabella let out a low moan of fear, and Carol immediately pulled her into her arms, protecting her. "Danny," said Carol, her voice trembling with anger, "get out of my house, now!" "Carol, you don't understand. If you don't hand over the girl voluntarily, they're going to come and get her, and when they come, you're going to have problems too." "Who are they?" asked Victor. "People you don't want to meet. People who have invested a lot of money in this business and aren't going to give up easily. And you? How much did you earn selling the work of enslaved children?" Danny laughed bitterly. "You think I did this for money? I did it because I was tired of always being the younger brother, always in your shadow. The company belonged to our father, but you always ran everything alone. So you decided to use children to have your own source of income. I decided to secure my future. And when I found out that one of the most valuable children was right here in your house, I saw an opportunity to solve all our problems." "Our problems? The only problems we have are the ones you created." Danny walked to the door, but before leaving, he turned around one last time. "You have until tomorrow morning to make a decision. Either you hand over the girl voluntarily, or she will be taken by force. And then, Victor, you will find out that there are consequences for those who interfere in the wrong business." The door slammed shut, leaving the family in a tense silence. Isabella was trembling in Carol's arms, murmuring repeatedly, "I don't want to go back to the dark place. Please don't send me back to the dark place." "Never," said Carol firmly, kissing the girl's forehead. "We're never going to let anyone take you." But Victor knew that making that promise would be harder than simply saying it. Danny had made it clear that powerful people were involved in that network, people who would not hesitate to use force. He looked at his wife holding Isabella, the two people who now meant everything to him, and made a decision. No matter what happened, he would not allow that child to return to the hell from which she had escaped. But first, he needed to find out exactly how deep and dangerous the network he had gotten himself into was, and how far his enemies would be willing to go to recover the girl they considered their property. That night, while Carol finally managed to get Isabella to fall asleep in the master bedroom, she had refused to sleep alone. Victor started making calls to lawyers, to journalists, to anyone who could help him protect his family. Because he knew that from now on he was officially at war, a war where the prize was not money or power, but the life of a 4-year-old girl who had changed their hearts forever. The morning arrived tense at the Collins house. Victor had spent the entire night making calls and searching the internet, trying to find any information about Hope House and the people involved. Carol hadn't slept a wink, watching over Isabella, who only managed to rest after much crying and nightmares. At 7 in the morning, the phone rang. It was the lawyer that Victor had managed to contact during the night. "Dr. Miller, were you able to find out anything?" "I got some disturbing information, Victor. Hope House really existed and was closed 3 months ago due to irregularities. But the process was hushed up. There was no in-depth investigation, no arrests, nothing." "How is that possible?" "Because several influential people were involved. I found documents that show that the regional director of social services received monthly payments to turn a blind eye. A man named Jake Fuller." Victor wrote down the name. "And there's more. The network didn't end with the closure of Hope House. They just moved. They now operate from a farm on the outskirts of Harmony Creek, disguised as a rural school." "What farm?" "Clearview Farm. Officially, it's an education project in the countryside for needy children. Unofficially, well, I think you already imagine." Victor felt nauseous. That exploitation network was larger and more organized than he had imagined. "Doctor, I need your help to protect my family. They came yesterday demanding that I hand over Isabella." "Victor, I'll be direct with you. Based on what I've discovered, these people have contacts throughout the region's judicial system. If they want to take the girl using legal means, you will have difficulty resisting, and using illegal means. Then the situation becomes even more dangerous. These people don't hesitate to use violence when necessary. When Victor hung up the phone, he found Carol in the kitchen trying to convince Isabella to eat something. The girl was pale and refused any food. "Aunt Carol," said Isabella with a weak voice, "are they going to take me back today?" "No, honey. We won't let them." But the man who looks like Uncle Victor said they would. Carol looked at her husband with despair in her eyes. How to explain to a 4-year-old child that the adult world was sometimes cruel and unfair? "Isabella," said Victor, crouching down next to her chair, "do you remember anything else about the place where you were before? Any detail can help us." The girl thought for a moment, playing nervously with a piece of bread. There were other girls there. One was called Annie. She was 6 years old. And there was a little boy who cried a lot, but the woman in white didn't let anyone comfort him. "Do you remember the boy's name?" "Peter. He was very small, smaller than me, and he always talked about his mommy." "Did his mommy take him there?" "No. His mommy was looking for him. I heard when she called the place, but the woman in white always said he wasn't there." Victor and Carol exchanged glances. This meant that there were parents looking for their children, unaware that they were being exploited in a criminal network. "Isabella, do you know how you got there? Who took you?" The girl's eyes filled with tears. "I was lost on the street. After the house where I stayed caught fire, a pretty woman said she was going to take me to a place where I would have food and a bed every day. But when we got there," she couldn't finish, starting to cry. Carol picked her up, rocking her gently. "It's okay, honey. You don't need to talk about it now." It was at that moment that they heard the sound of cars stopping in front of the house. Victor looked out the window and saw 2 black vans and an official social services car. "Carol, take Isabella to the bedroom and lock the door," he said urgently. "What's happening?" They came. Someone knocked on the door forcefully. When Victor opened it, he found Danny accompanied by Jake Fuller, the director of social services that the lawyer had mentioned, and 2 large men who were clearly acting as security. "Victor," said Danny with a cold expression, said, "I'm here to get the girl. She's not going anywhere." Jake Fuller stepped forward, showing some documents. "Mr. Collins, I have a court order here stating that the minor Isabella Silva is to be immediately removed from this residence and placed in state custody until her legal situation is resolved." Victor took the papers and examined them quickly. They looked official, but something seemed off. "This order was issued last night. How did you manage to process this so quickly?" "We have our methods," Jake replied with an unpleasant smile. "The important thing is that everything is legal. Now, where is the child? She's sleeping, and she's not leaving this house without an independent lawyer present." "You're not in a position to make demands," said one of the large men, taking a menacing step forward. That's when something unexpected happened. Carol appeared in the room, holding Isabella's hand, but her expressions weren't of fear. They were of determination. "If you want to take our daughter," Carol said in a firm voice, "you'll have to take us too." "What do you mean?" asked Danny, clearly not expecting this reaction. "Overnight, my husband and I made some interesting discoveries," Carol continued. "We discovered that Mr. Fuller receives irregular payments from a criminal organization. We discovered that there's a farm called Clearview Farm, where children are still being exploited. And we discovered that this court order is fake." Jake paled. "That's a lie. This order is perfectly legal." "Is it? Then why was the judge who supposedly signed it on vacation in Miami yesterday?" Victor asked, showing a printout he'd made of an online news article. "Why doesn't the record appear in the official court system?" A tense silence filled the room. Danny glanced nervously at the other men. "You two are too smart for your own good," he said finally. "But not smart enough." He signaled to the 2 large men, who began to move towards the family. It was then that Isabella did something no one expected. The girl let go of Carol's hand and ran to the living room window, shouting with all the strength of her little lungs, "Help! Help! They want to take me to the dark place. Help!" Her cries echoed through the quiet morning street, and immediately some windows of neighboring houses opened. People started to come out to see what was happening. "Shut up, girl!" shouted one of the men, trying to grab her. But Isabella continued shouting, "They make little children work until they get sick. They're bad. Help!" More neighbors appeared, some even coming out of their houses and approaching the Collins gate. Among them, Victor recognized Mrs. Higgins, the retired neighbor who had been a teacher for 40 years, and Joe, the owner of Joe's Bakery, who knew everyone in town. "What's going on here?" asked Mrs. Higgins in an authoritative voice. Jake tried to take control of the situation. "Just an official matter from social services, ma'am. It's none of your business. When a child cries for help on my street, it becomes my business," Mrs. Higgins replied firmly. "And I know this girl. It's little Isabella that Victor and Carol are taking care of." "Mrs. Higgins," Carol said, "these men want to take our daughter based on forged documents. They're part of a network that exploits child labor." "That's a very serious accusation," said Joe, taking his cell phone out of his pocket. "I think we'd better call the police to clarify this situation." "No," Jake said quickly. "There's no need to call the police. We can resolve this in a civilized manner." But it was too late. More neighbors had arrived, and the situation was getting out of the men's control. Danny realized that the plan had failed. "Let's go," he muttered to the others. "This has turned into a circus." "What about the girl?" Jake asked. "We'll think of another plan." As the men headed for their cars, Danny stopped at the door and looked directly at Victor. "This isn't over, brother. You won this battle, but the war is far from over." After they left, the neighbors remained there for some time, wanting to make sure the family was safe. Isabella, exhausted by the stress, had fallen asleep in Carol's arms. "Victor," said Mrs. Higgins, "if these men come back, don't hesitate to call us. This girl is part of our community now." When they were finally alone, Victor and Carol hugged for a long time, still trembling from the tension of what had happened. "We did it," Carol murmured. "For today, we did." "Yes," Victor agreed, "but Danny was right. This isn't over. They'll be back with a different plan." "Then we'd better be prepared," Carol said, looking at Isabella sleeping peacefully. "Because this girl is our daughter now, and no one is going to take her from us." But while they talked about protection and preparation, neither of them knew that, at that very moment, a new plan was already being drawn up. A plan that would involve not only taking them, but destroying any evidence that the child exploitation network existed. And this time, they wouldn't underestimate the determination of a family united by love. In the days that followed the failed attempt to take Isabella, a subtle but disturbing change took hold of Harmony Creek. Victor began to notice strange looks when he walked the streets, conversations that stopped abruptly when he approached, and a growing hostility from some merchants who had always been cordial. "It seems like they're spreading some kind of rumor about us," he commented to Carol during dinner, while Isabella played with her food, clearly without appetite. "And what kind of rumor?" "Yesterday at Joe's Bakery, Joe treated me coldly, and Mrs. Higgins from the clothing store practically kicked me out when I tried to buy some things for Isabella." Carol frowned, worried. "I think we should keep Isabella at home for now, until we understand what's going on." It was a wise decision, but it was causing an unexpected side effect on the girl. Isabella, who had begun to flourish in her new life with the Collinses, now showed signs of regression. She had returned to having frequent nightmares, refused to eat properly, and developed a behavior that worried Carol greatly. "Uncle Victor," Isabella said one morning, as he was getting ready to go to the factory, "am I a bad child?" "What? Of course not, honey. Why are you thinking that?" "Because since I arrived, you only have problems. Maybe if I leave, the bad men will stop bothering you." Victor's heart broke upon hearing that. He knelt down in front of Isabella and held her small hands. "Isabella, listen carefully to what I'm going to tell you. You are the best thing that has happened to our lives. The problems aren't because of you. They're because of bad people who want to hurt you. But if I hadn't run away from the dark place, if you hadn't run away, we would never have met the bravest and most intelligent girl in the world. And Aunt Carol would never have smiled again. But the words, however sincere they were, couldn't erase the feeling of guilt that was growing in the child's heart. Isabella began to behave in a self-destructive way, refusing to play, spending hours sitting in silence, and several times Carol found her trying to hide small personal objects, as if she was preparing to leave at any moment. The situation became even more tense when, on a Thursday afternoon, Isabella disappeared. Carol had gone quickly to the drugstore to pick up some medicine, leaving Isabella playing in the backyard. When she returned 15 minutes later, the backyard was empty. "Isabella! Isabella!" she shouted, searching the whole house. "Where are you?" The girl was nowhere to be found. Carol called Victor at the factory, desperate. "She's gone. I looked everywhere and she's not here." "Carol, calm down. I'm coming home right now. Call Mrs. Higgins, see if she saw Isabella pass by on the street." "I already called. No one saw anything." When Victor arrived home, he found Carol in a state of total despair, walking back and forth, calling all the neighbors. "It must have been them," she said through tears. "The men came back and took our girl." But Victor noticed something that Carol, in her despair, had missed. The gate to the backyard, which led to a vacant lot behind the house, was open, and there were small footprints in the soft earth that led in the direction of the woods. "Carol, look here. She left on her own." "Alone? Why? Remember what she said this morning? About leaving so we would stop having problems?" The realization hit Carol like a punch. Her girl, at 4 years old, had decided to run away to protect them. The two ran after the footprints, which led to a wooded area behind the house. It was a rugged terrain, full of tall trees and loose stones. A dangerous place for a small child, especially when it was starting to get dark. "Isabella, Isabella," they shouted, following the uncertain trail. The footprints were difficult to follow in the dense woods, but Victor had experience with trails. He had grown up playing in that region when he was a child. He managed to follow subtle signs, broken branches, trampled leaves, small marks on the ground. They walked for almost an hour when they heard a sound that made their hearts stop, a cry of pain coming from further ahead. "It was her," Carol said, running towards the sound. They found Isabella at the foot of a tall tree, unconscious, with a wound on her head and her left arm in an odd position that suggested a fracture. Apparently she had tried to climb the tree, perhaps to hide or to try to see the way back, and had ended up falling. My God," Carol murmured, carefully taking the girl in her arms. "Isabella, wake up, my dear, wake up." Victor quickly checked the child's vital signs. She was breathing, but she was unconscious, and the wound on her head was bleeding. "We need to take her to the hospital immediately," he said, picking up Isabella in his arms. The run back home, carrying the unconscious girl, was desperate. When they finally got to the car, Carol called the hospital, warning that a pediatric emergency was arriving. Throughout the drive to the hospital, Isabella remained unconscious, and Carol held her little hand, praying softly, "Please, God, don't take our girl away from us, please." At the hospital, Isabella was immediately taken to the emergency room, where doctors began a series of tests. Victor and Carol stayed in the waiting room, hugging, waiting for news. They were the 3 longest hours of their lives. Finally, Dr. Harrison, the same doctor who had examined Isabella previously, came out of the emergency room. "How is she?" Carol asked, rising sharply. "She's going to be fine. She has a mild concussion and her arm is fractured, but nothing serious. What worries me more is her emotional state." "What do you mean?" "When she woke up, the first thing she said was, 'I tried to leave so you wouldn't have any more problems.' She is clearly blaming herself for situations she has no control over." "Can we see her?" "You can, but she's very emotionally fragile. You need to be very careful." When they entered the room, they found Isabella awake, but with such a sad look that it broke their hearts. Her arm was in a cast, and there was a bandage on her head. "Uncle Victor, Aunt Carol," she murmured in a weak voice. "Sorry for running away. I just didn't want you to have any more problems because of me." Carol started to cry, approaching the bed and carefully taking the girl's hand. "Isabella, my dear, you should never think that you are a problem for us. You are our daughter. You are the most important thing in our lives. But the bad men come here because of me." "The bad men come here because they are bad," Victor said, sitting on the other side of the bed. "Not because you did anything wrong. You never did anything wrong." "I don't want you to get hurt because of me," Isabella insisted, tears running down her small face. "Isabella," Carol said, gently wiping the girl's tears, "when you were little, your birth mother took you to a place thinking it was good for you, but she found out it was dangerous. Do you know what she did?" "What?" "She fought to get you out of there, even knowing she could have problems, because that's what mothers do, protect their children, no matter what." "And are you my mom and dad now?" "We are. Forever," Victor said, his voice choked with emotion. It was at that moment, seeing his girl hurt in a hospital bed, that something changed definitively in Victor's heart. He realized that it wasn't enough just to protect Isabella from the men who wanted to take her. He needed to end the source of the problem. He needed to expose the entire child exploitation network, no matter the consequences for himself. That night, while Isabella finally slept peacefully for the first time in days, the doctors had given her a mild sedative to help her rest. Victor made a decision that would change everything. He was going to seek out the press. He was going to tell the whole story. He was going to expose Danny, Ozzy, Jake Fuller, and everyone else involved in that network, even knowing that this could put his family in even greater danger. But looking at Isabella sleeping with her arm in a cast, he knew there was no other choice. Some battles needed to be fought, no matter the price. And this was a battle he was determined to win. 3 days after Isabella's accident, while she recovered at home with her arm in a cast, Victor executed his plan. He had spent hours searching the internet until he found Mariana Souza, an investigative journalist from Belo Horizonte, known for exposing cases of corruption and crimes against children. The call was made on a Saturday morning when Carol was taking care of Isabella in her room. "Dr. Souza, my name is Victor Collins. I have information about a child labor exploitation network operating in the Harmony Creek area." "What kind of information?" asked the journalist, immediately interested. "Documents, names, addresses, and a witness, a child who escaped from this network. Can I meet you today? Cases like this are urgent." "You can, but I need you to understand that influential people are involved, including local authorities." "Mr. Collins, this is exactly the type of case I investigate. I'll be there at 2 o'clock this afternoon." When Mariana Souza arrived at the Collins house, she brought with her a cameraman and a professional recorder. She was a 40-year-old woman with a serious appearance and a determined look. "Before we talk," she said, "I need you to understand that once this story is published, you will become direct targets of these people. Are you sure you want to go ahead?" Victor looked at Carol, who was holding Isabella in her lap. The girl watched the stranger with curiosity, but without fear, something rare since the accident. "We're sure," Carol said firmly. "Our daughter will never be safe as long as this network exists." "Daughter? Was the child officially adopted?" "Not yet," Victor admitted, "but she's our daughter in our hearts. And that's why we need to act." Mariana spent the next 2 hours recording detailed interviews with Victor and Carol, noting names, dates, and examining all the documents that Nurse Patricia had provided. When it was time to talk to Isabella, she knelt down to the girl's level and spoke in a very soft voice. "Hi, Isabella. My name is Mariana. Can I ask you some questions?" Isabella looked at Carol, who nodded encouragingly. "Yes," said the girl timidly. Do you remember the place where you were before you met Uncle Victor and Aunt Carol? Isabella's eyes filled with sadness, but she nodded. It was the dark place. There were many children there, and they were all sad. What did you do in that place? We worked. We separated small things into little boxes, screws, seeds, buttons. It had to be very fast, or the woman in white would get angry. And if you got tired, you couldn't get tired. You had to work until the woman said you could stop. Sometimes it was at night. Mariana asked a few more careful questions, always observing Isabella's reactions so as not to traumatize her further. When she finished, she had enough material for a devastating report. "I'm going to publish the story on Monday," she said. "But before, I'm going to do some additional checks. I want to talk to this nurse Patricia and, if possible, locate other children who may have gone through this situation." "Be careful," Victor warned. "These people are dangerous." "I know. It's not the first time I've investigated something like this." After the journalist left, the Collins house was filled with an atmosphere of tense expectation. They knew that once the report was published, there would be no turning back. They would officially be at war against powerful and unscrupulous people. That night, Isabella had another nightmare, but this time it was different. Instead of waking up crying, she called Carol and said, "Aunt Carol, I dreamed about the other children from the dark place. They were asking when someone was going to help them too. My dear, maybe someone will help them soon." Really, really. On Monday morning, the report was published online and caused an immense impact. The title was devastating. Child Exploitation Network operates freely in upstate New York with the connivance of authorities. The article featured photos of the documents, excerpts from the interview with Isabella, with her face protected, and most importantly, specific names of people involved in the scheme. The Collins phone began to ring incessantly. Journalists from all over the country wanted interviews, state authorities requested information, and child protection organizations offered support. But the threats also began to arrive. The first was an anonymous call at 10 in the morning. "You've made a very big mistake. You're going to pay dearly for it." The second was a car that passed slowly in front of the house several times during the afternoon, with men who openly photographed the house. The third was the most disturbing. Someone had left a photo of Isabella playing in the backyard under the door, with a message written on the back. "We know where she is at all times." "That's it," Carol said after seeing the photo. "Now they've openly declared war." "Carol, maybe we should leave town for a few days," Victor suggested, "until the situation calms down." "No. If we run away now, we'll spend the rest of our lives running. Besides, if they really want to get Isabella, they'll get her anywhere. At least here we have neighbors who support us." As if she had heard the conversation, Mrs. Higgins appeared at the door with a casserole dish. "I came to see how you're doing," she said. "I read the report online. Victor, you did the right thing." "Thank you, Mrs. Higgins. But now we're worried about retaliation. That's why I came here. I talked to the other neighbors. From today, we're going to do an informal street watch. There will always be someone watching your house. You don't need to get involved in this." "Of course we do. That girl is part of our community. And what you did was brave. You exposed a terrible situation that was happening under our noses." During the afternoon, more neighbors appeared. Joe brought a simple alarm system that he installed in the house for free. Mrs. Rose, the seamstress from the street above, offered to stay with Isabella during the day if necessary. "You see," Carol said to Victor, "when we do the right thing, good people come to support us." But at night, when Isabella was already asleep, they received a visit that changed everything. It was Danny, but he wasn't accompanied by the intimidating men from before. He was alone, with an expression that Victor had never seen on his brother's face. Genuine fear. "Victor, I need to talk to you," he said, visibly nervous. "If you've come to get Isabella—" "No, it's not that, it's the opposite." Danny entered without waiting for an invitation, constantly looking over his shoulder. "They're furious with me because of the report. They say it was my fault for not being able to get the girl when I had the chance." And it was. "Victor, you don't understand. These people, they don't play around." When someone becomes a problem, they eliminate the problem. What do you mean by eliminate? They've already eliminated Patricia, the nurse who talked to you. Victor's blood ran cold. What do you mean they eliminated her? She suffered a car accident last night, right after the report came out. Coincidence? Carol covered her mouth with her hand, horrified. "And now," Danny continued, "they want to eliminate you too. And the girl—" "Why are you telling us this? Because as much as I've been involved in this, I never wanted it to come to this point. I just wanted to make money, not this." Danny sat heavily in a chair, running his hands through his hair. "They're coming tomorrow night with a plan to make it look like an accident with the whole family. A gas leak, a fire, something like that." "What about you? Aren't they going after you too?" "They already have. That's why I'm here. It's my last chance to do the right thing." For the first time in his life, Victor saw genuine remorse in his younger brother's eyes. "What do you want us to do?" "Leave town tonight, now, and don't come back until this situation is resolved by the state authorities." It was exactly what Carol had said she wouldn't do, but now, with the direct threat to their lives, there was no other choice. "Where can we go?" "I have a cousin in Albany. He has nothing to do with this business. You can stay there." "What about you?" "I'm going to turn myself in to the state authorities. I'm going to tell them everything I know. It's the only way to stop these people." That morning, as Harmony Creek slept, a family quietly fled the city, taking only the essentials and a 4-year-old girl who continued to be the center of a battle between good and evil. But this time, they weren't running alone. They were fleeing with the hope that the truth they had exposed would finally bring justice to all the children who were still suffering in silence. Danny's cousin's house in Albany was small and simple, but it represented security for the Collins family. Mark, a 50-year-old man who worked as a mechanic, welcomed them with open arms, even without fully understanding the situation. "You can stay as long as you need," he said, preparing the guest room. "Danny called me in the middle of the night, said it was an emergency." Isabella was confused by the sudden change. She had woken up in the middle of the night with Carol bundling her up, saying they were going on a special trip, and now she found herself in a strange house with people she didn't know. "Aunt Carol," she whispered as they unpacked, "are we going back home?" "Yes, my dear. We just need to stay here for a few days." "Are the bad men after us again?" Carol felt her heart clench. How to explain to a 4-year-old child that her life was in constant danger because of the greed of unscrupulous adults? "Some bad men are angry because we told the truth about the dark place, but the good police are going to arrest them." During the first few days in Albany, they tried to maintain a normal routine. Victor contacted the journalist Mariana Souza daily, who was coordinating an operation with the state authorities to dismantle the entire network. "The FBI has taken over the case," Mariana reported in a call. "They found Clearview Farm and rescued 16 children. 16, Victor, all between the ages of 2 and 7. And those responsible? Some have been arrested, including Ozzy and Jake Fuller, but Director Regina has disappeared. And there are indications that the network is even larger than we imagined." "Larger how?" "Apparently, they operated in at least 3 states, and we have information that some children were sold to other organizations." Victor's stomach churned. The idea that Isabella could have been the victim of something even worse was unbearable. "What about Danny?" "Your brother is fully cooperating with the investigations. His testimony was crucial in locating the farm." Despite the partially positive news, the tension remained high. On the Wednesday of the first week, something happened that showed they weren't completely safe yet. Isabella was playing in the small backyard of Mark's house when she saw a man standing across the street, watching the house. She ran inside, shouting, "Uncle Victor! There's a man outside, looking at us." Victor looked out the window and saw a familiar figure, one of the men who had accompanied Danny in the attempt to take Isabella. The man noticed that he had been seen and quickly walked away, but the message was clear. They had been found. "Mark, I need you to take your family to a relative's house today," Victor said urgently. "Why? What's going on?" "Dangerous people have found us. We don't want you and your family to get hurt because of us. I'm not going to abandon you. Mark, these people killed a woman just because she told the truth. Please, take your family to a safe place." That afternoon, as Mark took his wife and 2 children to his mother-in-law's house in another city, Victor made a desperate call to Mariana. "They found us. We need to get out of here." "Where can you go?" "I don't know. We're running out of options." "Listen, Victor. I have a proposal. The federal authorities are organizing a temporary protection program for you, but it would be in a very distant city, maybe in another state. How long would it last? Until everyone involved in the network is captured. It could take months." Victor looked at Isabella, who was sitting on the sofa next to Carol, trying to distract herself with a coloring book. The girl had lost weight in recent days, was quieter, and had returned to having frequent nightmares. "Mariana, can I ask you a direct question? Honestly, do you think we'll ever be able to have a normal life?" "Victor, the truth is that you stirred up a very dangerous hornet's nest. These people have resources and contacts in various places. Even if they arrest some, others may continue to hunt you. So our daughter is going to live on the run forever." "Not necessarily. There's a possibility of—" The line was cut off abruptly. Victor tried to call back several times, but Mariana's phone was busy. "What happened?" Carol asked. "I don't know. The line dropped." It was then that they heard the sound of cars stopping in front of the house. Several cars. "Grab only the essentials," Victor said softly, but there was despair in his voice. "We're going out the back." They quickly gathered some clothes in a bag, and Victor picked up Isabella. The girl sensed the adult's panic and began to cry silently. "I don't want to run anymore," she murmured. "I'm tired of running." They went out the back of Mark's house and walked quickly through the side streets, always looking back. Victor didn't know where to go, but he knew they needed to keep moving. After an hour of walking aimlessly, they stopped in a small park to rest. Isabella was exhausted, and Carol also showed signs of extreme fatigue. "Victor," Carol said, "we can't continue like this. Look at our daughter. She's falling apart." It was true. Isabella was sitting on a bench, rocking back and forth, a behavior she had developed in moments of great stress. "I know," Victor admitted, "but I don't know what to do. We have nowhere to go." It was at that moment that a familiar voice called out to them, "Victor! Carol!" They turned and saw Mariana Souza running towards them, accompanied by 2 men in suits. "Thank God I found you," she said, breathless. "These are federal agents." "They've come to get us." "How did you find us?" "We tracked the signal from your cell phone before you turned it off. We had to get to you before the others." One of the agents, a dark-haired man in his 40s, introduced himself. "I'm Agent Costa from the FBI. We need to get you out of here immediately. We have information that a group of hitmen has been hired to eliminate you tonight." "Hitmen?" Carol asked, horrified. "Professional assassins," explained the agent. "The network you helped expose moves millions of dollars a year. They're not going to give up easily." Isabella, hearing the conversation, began to tremble violently. "Uncle Victor," she said in a weak voice, "are they going to kill me?" "No, my dear," he said, hugging her tightly. "We're going to protect you. But I'm tired of being scared. To just want to go home." Agent Costa knelt down in front of Isabella. "Princess, you are a very brave girl, and because of your courage, Other children have been saved from the dark place, but now we need to take you to a super safe place where no one can find you. For how long? We don't know yet, but in the meantime, you'll be with your parents, and we'll be protecting you." They were taken to an armored car and driven to an undisclosed location. During the trip, Victor asked the agent about the progress of the investigations. "We managed to dismantle 3 cells of the network," the agent reported, "but we discovered that it is international. It has ramifications in Paraguay and Bolivia. And that means? It means you won't be completely safe until the entire organization is destroyed. And that could take years." Carol hugged Isabella, who had fallen asleep exhausted during the trip. "Years," she murmured. "Our daughter will grow up living in hiding for years." "Mrs. Collins," the agent said softly, "there is an alternative, but it's a very difficult decision." "What alternative?" "Witness protection program. You would receive new identities and be permanently relocated to another country. You would live normal lives, but you could never return to the United States or have contact with family and friends." The proposal fell like a bomb in the silent car. Permanent exile. Never see Harmony Creek again. Never see their friends. Never be Victor and Carol Collins again. "How long do we have to decide?" Victor asked. "A few weeks, but not much longer than that." That night, in a secure hotel whose location not even they knew, Victor and Carol stayed awake, talking about the most difficult decision of their lives. Saving Isabella would mean sacrificing everything they were before they met her. But looking at the girl sleeping between them, still trembling even in her sleep, they began to realize that perhaps it wasn't really a difficult choice. Some things in life were worth any sacrifice. 3 weeks passed in the secure hideout, and the tension was beginning to deeply affect the whole family. The location was a remote farm in upstate New York, protected by federal agents, but it felt more like a gilded cage. Isabella had completely stopped talking in recent days, communicating only through gestures and drawings. Her drawings had changed drastically. Before, she drew colorful birds flying freely. Now, her creations showed small figures locked in boxes, always in dark shades of black and gray. When Carol asked about the drawings, Isabella simply shook her head and walked away. "She's regressing," explained the child psychologist that the government had sent to assess the situation. "Prolonged stress is causing secondary trauma. The girl associates being hidden with being locked up again." "What can we do?" Carol asked, desperate to see her daughter closing in on herself more and more. "She needs stability, a place where she can feel permanently safe. This constant uncertainty is destroying her psychologically." That afternoon, while Isabella slept, she had developed the habit of sleeping several hours during the day as a way to escape reality. Victor and Carol received a visit that would change everything. It was Mariana Souza, accompanied by a woman they didn't know, a woman of about 30 years old with brown hair and eyes that seemed to carry a deep sadness. "Victor, Carol, this is Zuleika Silva," Mariana said carefully. "She has something very important to tell you about Isabella." Victor's heart raced. There was something about the woman's last name that bothered him, but he couldn't identify what. "Nice to meet you," Zuleika said in a trembling voice. I need to tell you something about Isabella." "What is it?" Carol asked, instinctively protective. She's my daughter." The silence that followed was deafening. Carol paled completely, and Victor felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath his feet. "What do you mean, your daughter?" Carol murmured. "I am Isabella's birth mother. My real name is Zuleika Silva." Zuleika began to cry, but continued speaking. 2 years ago, I was going through a very difficult situation. I'd lost my job, I couldn't pay rent, I didn't have how to feed Isabella properly. That's when a social worker appeared at my door. "What social worker?" "She said she worked for an organization that took care of children at risk. She said that Isabella could stay in a kind of special daycare during the day, where she would receive education, proper food, medical care. Victor and Carol began to understand where that story was leading. But it was a lie, Zuleika continued. After a week, when I went to pick up my daughter, they told me that she had been transferred to a unit in another state because of a health problem. There was always a different excuse for me not being able to see her. And you didn't suspect anything? Of course I suspected, but they had official documents. They seemed to be serious people. And when I started asking too many questions, the threats started. What kind of threats? They said that if I continued to bother them, I would be accused of child neglect and I would never see my daughter again. As I was poor, without a college degree, I thought they could really do that. Zuleika dried her tears and continued. I spent the last 2 years looking for Isabella. I went to honest social workers, to the press, to the police. Nobody believed me. Until I saw Mariana's report and I recognized my daughter in the photos. Carol was crying silently. The idea that Isabella had a mother who had been looking for her for 2 years was devastating. Where were you living during this time? Victor asked. In a small town near Syracuse. I work as a seamstress to get money to keep looking for Isabella. And now? Carol asked, her voice almost inaudible. Do you want to take her? Zuleika looked at Carol with an understanding expression. I want my daughter back, of course, but I also know that you took care of her when I couldn't, and I know that she loves you. It was at that moment that they heard small steps coming from the hallway. Isabella had woken up and was walking towards the living room. When she appeared at the door and saw Zuleika, her reaction was instantaneous and unexpected. The girl stood still for a few seconds, studying the woman's face, and then murmured the first word she had said in days. Mommy? Zuleika couldn't contain herself. She knelt down and opened her arms, and Isabella ran to her, throwing herself into her arms as if she had never doubted that this moment would come. My girl, Zuleika sobbed, hugging her daughter. Mommy never stopped looking for you. Carol got up abruptly and left the room, unable to bear the scene. Victor followed her, finding her on the back porch, crying uncontrollably. We lost her, Carol said through tears. We lost our daughter. Carol, you saw how she ran into that woman's arms, how she called her Mommy. She never called us Mommy and Daddy. Victor hugged his wife, feeling his own pain mixing with hers. They had saved Isabella, protected her, loved her with all the strength of their hearts, and now she would return to her birth mother. Maybe it's the best for her, he said, trying to be strong. Maybe with her real mother she can have a normal life. But what about us? What will become of us without her? It was a question that Victor didn't know how to answer. Isabella had become the center of their lives, the reason why they had rediscovered love, family, purpose. They stayed on the porch for almost an hour, listening to the joyful voices of Isabella and Zuleika talking in the living room. The girl had started talking again. She was laughing. She seemed more alive than she had been in weeks. When they went back inside, they found mother and daughter sitting on the floor, looking together at a photo album that Zuleika had brought. Look, Isabella, Zuleika said. This photo is from your 2nd birthday. Do you remember the chocolate cake? Isabella nodded enthusiastically, pointing to the photo. And here you were, learning to walk. You were very stubborn. You wanted to walk alone. It was then that Isabella noticed Victor and Carol standing at the door. She got up and ran to them, taking their hands and pulling them close to Zuleika. Mommy, she said to Zuleika, these are my daddy Victor and my mommy Carol. They took care of me when you weren't there. Zuleika looked at the couple, and in her eyes there was gratitude, not resentment. Isabella told me that you were very good to her, that you protected her from the bad men. We loved her as if she were our biological daughter, Carol said, her voice choked with emotion. I know, and that's why I want to make a proposal. What proposal? Zuleika took a deep breath before speaking. I am a simple woman, without resources. I work as a seamstress in a small town. I earn little. I can't give Isabella the opportunities that you can give. But she is my daughter, and I love her more than anything." "We understand," Victor said. "But Isabella also loves you, and you have proven that you would do anything to protect her. So, what if we found a way for us all to be a family?" "What do you mean?" "What if you were Isabella's official adoptive parents, but I continued to be part of her life? Weekends, holidays, vacations. She would have the financial and educational stability that you can offer, but she would maintain the connection with me." Isabella looked from one adult to another, as if she understood instinctively that an important decision was being made. "Can I have 2 daddies and 2 mommies?" she asked. "You can, my dear," Zuleika replied, "if everyone agrees." For the first time in weeks, Carol smiled truly. It would be amazing," she murmured. "But there's a problem," Victor said. "We are still in danger. This criminal network is still after us." "That's why," Mariana interjected, "the witness protection program is still in effect. But now you can consider the possibility of including Zuleika in the program as well." "Does that mean leaving the country?" Zuleika asked. "Probably, at least temporarily." Zuleika looked at Isabella, who was playing with Carol's hair, seeming happier and more relaxed than she had been in months. "If it's to keep my daughter safe and give her a complete family," she said, "I would go anywhere in the world." That night, for the first time since they had fled from Harmony Creek, Isabella slept through the night without nightmares. And for the first time since they had met her, she called Carol Mommy and Victor Daddy. They had found a solution that no one expected, not choosing between biological love and adoptive love, but uniting them in an unconventional but genuinely loving family. Now it only remained to face the last challenge, building a new life in safety, away from danger, but together. The preparations for the new life began immediately, but brought with them a disturbing discovery that would change everything once again. During a meeting with the federal agents to discuss the details of the protection program, Agent Costa received an urgent call that made him pale. "I need to talk to you about a serious complication," he said after hanging up the phone. "Director Regina was captured yesterday, trying to cross the border into Canada." "Isn't that good?" Victor asked. "It would be if she hadn't made a revelation that changes everything. Apparently, Isabella wasn't just any child to the network. She has a very specific ability that they considered extremely valuable." Zuleika held her daughter's hand more tightly. "What ability?" "Her ability to recognize complex numerical patterns in a matter of seconds. Regina said they were training Isabella to identify sequences in bank codes and security systems." "My God," Carol murmured. "They wanted to use a 4-year-old child for cybercrimes." "Exactly, and that's why they won't give up. Isabella is not just a witness they want to silence. She's an asset that they consider irreplaceable." The information fell like a bomb on the newly reunited family. Isabella, who was playing with a puzzle in the corner of the room, looked up, realizing the tension of the adults. "Did something bad happen again?" she asked in a small voice. "No, my dear," Zuleika said quickly. "The adults are just talking about adult things." But Isabella had become very perceptive during the months of trauma. She approached the group and looked directly at Agent Costa. "It's about my head that works differently, isn't it?" The silence that followed was revealing. Isabella herself, at 4 years old, had understood that her exceptional intelligence was both a gift and a curse. "Isabella," Victor said, crouching down to her level, "have you always known that you were special?" "I always knew that I saw numbers where other children didn't. In the dark place, the woman in white said that my head was useful. I didn't like it when she said that." "Why didn't you like it?" "Because when someone is too useful, they never let you go." The painful wisdom of a child who had been exploited reached all the adults present. Isabella knew instinctively that her special ability made her a permanent target. "What's our situation now?" Zuleika asked. More dangerous than we thought, Agent Costa admitted. The network has international connections. Even if you leave the country, they have the resources to find you. So there is no safe place. There is, but it would require almost complete isolation. A remote island, a secluded town in the mountains, something like that. You would live comfortably, but you would have minimal contact with the outside world. Carol sat heavily in a chair. That's no life for a child. Isabella needs school, friends, a normal future. I agree, the agent said. That's why we have an alternative proposal. More risky, but it could solve the problem definitively. What proposal? Using Isabella as bait to capture the remaining leaders of the network. Absolutely not, Zuleika exploded. I'm not going to use my daughter as bait for criminals. Wait, let me explain, the agent said quickly. It would be a fully controlled operation. The plan was to keep Isabella in a safe location, but make it appear like she was accessible. When they tried to grab her, we'd capture them all at once. What if something goes wrong? Victor asked. It's a risk, I admit. But it's the only way to guarantee Isabella has a normal life in the future. It was then that Isabella did something unexpected. She walked up to Agent Costa and said, I want to help catch the bad guys. Isabella, no, Carol said immediately. You're too young to make that kind of decision, but I want the other children not to suffer like I suffered. And I want you all not to be scared anymore. The determination in the 4-year-old's voice surprised everyone. Despite the trauma, despite the fear, she maintained an impressive courage and a sense of justice that touched deeply. My dear, Zuleika said, hugging her, this is very dangerous. I know, but I've been through dangerous things before, and now I have 2 daddies and 2 mummies to protect me. For the next 2 hours, the adults intensely discussed the pros and cons of the operation. Mariana, who had remained silent until then, finally spoke up. I've been covering cases like this for 15 years, and I can tell you that families who enter the full protection program rarely achieve a truly normal life. The children grow up isolated, develop psychological problems, never feel safe. And you think the operation is a good idea? I think it's risky, but it might be the only chance Isabella has for a real future. Without always looking over her shoulder, without always being afraid. That night, after Isabella fell asleep, the 4 adults gathered in the kitchen to make a final decision. The tension was palpable, as everyone knew that any choice could have irreversible consequences. If we decide to do the operation, Agent Costa said, it would have to be in the next few weeks. Our sources say they're planning something big to get Isabella back. What kind of thing? Victor asked. A coordinated attack on multiple fronts. They've found out where you are, identified your new extended family, and they're willing to use all necessary resources. How many people are we talking about? At least 20 operators. Some from Brazil, others hired abroad. All professionals. The number was terrifying. 20 professional killers after a 4-year-old girl. And if we do the operation, how many federal agents would be protecting Isabella? Zuleika asked. A task force of 50 agents. It would be the largest operation against child trafficking ever conducted in the country. 50 against 20 sounds like better odds, Victor commented. But what if they find out it's a trap? That's the risk. That's why we need the bait to be convincing. Isabella would have to appear really vulnerable and accessible. Carol shook her head. I can't accept the idea of using our daughter as bait, even in a controlled operation. I understand your feelings, the agent said, but consider the alternative. You'll spend the rest of your lives running. Isabella will grow up always afraid, always hidden. That's also a form of prison. It was then that they heard small footsteps coming from the hallway. Isabella appeared in the kitchen doorway, holding her teddy bear. I couldn't sleep, she said. Are you still talking about the bad guys? Come here, my dear, Zuleika said, picking her up. Isabella looked at the 4 adults and asked a question that demonstrated impressive maturity for her age. If I help the police catch the bad guys, Can I have a normal life after that? Can I go to school, have friends, play in the park? Yes, Agent Costa answered honestly. If we can catch them all, you can have a completely normal life. And will you all still be my family? Forever, Carol promised, kissing her forehead. Isabella was silent for a long moment, as if carefully weighing her options. Finally, she looked at each adult and said, "Then I want to do it. I want to help catch the bad guys so other children don't suffer in the dark place." The decision of a 4-year-old girl had just determined the course of a multi-million-dollar federal operation and the future of dozens of people. But looking at the determination in her big, dark eyes, everyone realized that Isabella was no longer just a victim who needed to be protected. She had become a small but courageous warrior, willing to face her worst fears to ensure that other children did not go through what she had gone through. The operation would be dangerous, but now everyone was united around a common goal: to give Isabella, and all the children like her, the chance to have the childhood they deserved. The operation was named Code Freedom and took 3 weeks to prepare. The plan was complex. Isabella would be placed in a safe house in Albany, seemingly unprotected, while dozens of federal agents would discreetly position themselves in a 2-mile area around her. During the preparations, something unexpected happened that almost changed everything. Isabella began to develop even more impressive abilities than the agents had imagined. During a testing session with the specialized psychologist, she demonstrated capabilities that left everyone speechless. "Show them what you can do with numbers, my dear," Carol said, encouraging her. Isabella looked at a computer screen that showed a seemingly random sequence of numbers: 4, 15, 23, 42, 58, 77, 99. "The next number is 124, she said immediately. "How do you know that?" the systems expert asked, impressed. "Because the numbers are telling a story. 4 plus 11 is 15, 15 plus 8 is 23. The difference always changes: 11, 8, 19, 16, 19, 22. It's a pattern that repeats every 3 numbers. The expert checked on the computer. The sequence really followed the pattern that Isabella had identified in seconds. "And this here?" he asked, showing another screen with a series of apparently incomprehensible codes. Isabella studied it for less than 10 seconds. "This code is wrong. There's an extra number on the 3rd line. It should be 847, not 8471. Again, she was right. The code had been intentionally altered to test her ability, and she had identified the error immediately. "Doctor," Agent Costa said to the expert, "what is your professional assessment?" "This child has a pattern recognition ability that I've never seen before, not even in adults with specific training. She literally sees math in a way that's almost supernatural." The discovery brought a disturbing understanding of why the criminal network was so desperate to get Isabella back. With skills like that, she could break bank security codes, identify patterns in surveillance systems, or even detect irregularities in forged documents. "This makes our operation even more important," Agent Costa said. "If these criminals manage to use her skills for cyber activities, the damage would be incalculable. But it also makes everything more dangerous," Zuleika observed. "They'll do anything to get her." "Exactly. That's why we reinforced the security of the operation." 2 days before the operation, Isabella made a request that surprised everyone. "I want to write a letter to the children in the dark place." "What letter, my dear?" Carol asked. "A letter saying, 'Don't be afraid, that someone will save them too.'" Carol helped Isabella write the letter in her still childish handwriting. "To the children who are in the dark place, I am Isabella, and I was there too. Now I have a family who loves me, and I will help the police catch the bad guys. Don't be afraid. Soon you will also have families who will love you. Kiss from Isabella." The letter was a powerful reminder that this operation was not just about protecting Isabella, but about saving dozens of other children who were still suffering. On the eve of the operation, the family spent the night together in a hotel suite in Albany. It was possible that it would be the last night they would spend together if something went wrong. "Isabella," Victor said, "tomorrow will be a very important day. Are you sure you want to do this?" "I'm sure, Daddy Victor, but can I ask a question?" "Of course. If I die tomorrow, will you remember me?" The question hit everyone like a punch in the stomach. The idea that a 4-year-old child had to think about her own death was devastating. "Isabella," Zuleika said, hugging her tightly, "you're not going to die. The police will protect you. But if I die, will you remember that I tried to help other children?" "My dear," Carol said with tears in her eyes, "you're not going to die. But even if something bad happened, we will forever remember the bravest girl in the world. And will you tell everyone that I wasn't afraid of the bad guys? We will tell that you were a heroine," Victor promised. That morning, Isabella slept between Carol and Zuleika, while Victor stayed awake in the armchair next to the bed, watching. He watched his family sleeping and wondered how a 4-year-old girl had become the center of a federal operation of such magnitude. The next morning, the time had come. The house chosen for the operation was in a residential neighborhood in Albany, seemingly normal, but in fact completely monitored by undercover federal agents. Isabella was dressed in ordinary clothes, a pink t-shirt and denim shorts, and taken to the house at 9 in the morning. She seemed calm, but Carol noticed that her little hands were shaking. "Everything will be all right, my little flower," Carol whispered in her ear during the farewell hug. "I know, Mommy Carol. I trust the good police." Victor, Carol, and Zuleika were taken to an improvised command center 2 miles away, where they could follow everything through security cameras installed in the house. "All positions are occupied," Agent Costa informed. "We have 48 agents in a 2-mile area. Isabella is completely protected." On the monitors, they could see Isabella playing quietly in the living room of the house, pretending to watch television while actually waiting for the criminals. The first 2 hours passed without incident. Then, at 11:30 a.m., the motion sensors began to detect suspicious activity. "We have movement on the periphery," a technician announced. 3 vehicles approaching from different directions. "How many people?" Agent Costa asked. "Hard to say, but at least 15, maybe more." On the monitors, Isabella continued to play, apparently oblivious to what was approaching. But Carol noticed that she had stopped playing with the toys and was organizing the cushions on the sofa into specific patterns, a behavior she had developed when she was nervous. "She knows they're coming," Carol murmured. "How can she know?" Zuleika asked. "Isabella has developed very sharp instincts during the time she spent on the run. She senses when danger is approaching." At 11:45 a.m., the first group of criminals arrived at the perimeter of the house. They were men dressed as maintenance workers, but carrying equipment that clearly wasn't normal tools. "Operation Freedom initiated," Agent Costa announced over the radio. "All agents in position." It was then that something went terribly wrong. The criminals stopped abruptly less than 100 yards from the house and began to retreat. "They found out it's a trap," one of the technicians shouted. "How is that possible?" Agent Costa asked. "I don't know, but they're withdrawing quickly." On the monitors, Isabella had gotten up from the sofa and was looking out the window, as if she instinctively knew that something had changed. "We need to get her out of there now," Carol said, desperate. "Calm down. The house is still safe. They didn't even get close." But 5 minutes later, they discovered the criminals' real plan. While the first group retreated, a second, much larger group had positioned itself on the other side of the operation. "We have a problem," the technician announced, his voice filled with panic. "They didn't come to get Isabella in the house." "What do you mean?" "They came to get her family at the command center." At that moment, the lights in the command center went out, and the sound of gunfire began to echo from outside the building. The operation had turned into an ambush, and now it wasn't just Isabella who was in danger. It was the whole family that had risked everything to save her. Chaos took over the command center in a matter of seconds. With the lights out and the sound of gunfire outside, federal agents desperately tried to re-establish communication with outside teams while protecting civilians inside the building. "Everyone on the ground!" Agent Costa shouted, pushing Victor, Carol and Zuleika behind a reinforced table. "It's a coordinated ambush!" Carol clung to her husband's arm, while Zuleika cried silently. "What about Isabella?" Carol shouted over the noise. "What's happening to our daughter?" On the monitors that were still running on emergency power, they could see Isabella in the safe house. The girl was no longer playing. She was standing in the middle of the room, looking directly at one of the cameras, as if she knew that her family was in danger. "Her house is still safe," a technician informed, checking the sensors. "The criminals haven't approached. The attack is only here." "That doesn't make sense," Agent Costa muttered. "Why would they attack the command center instead of getting the girl?" It was Victor who first understood the strategy. "They don't want to get Isabella now," he said, a terrible understanding taking over his voice. "They want to eliminate her whole family first. Without us, she'll be completely alone and vulnerable." "My God," Zuleika whispered. "They're going to kill us first and then get her." The sound of gunfire was getting closer. Through the windows, they could see flashes of light and shadows moving quickly around the building. "How many agents do we have in here?" Victor asked. 8, Agent Costa replied. "The rest are positioned around Isabella's house." 8 against how many? "From the sounds I'm hearing, at least 20. The situation seemed desperate. But it was at that moment that something unexpected happened on the monitors. Isabella had disappeared from the room where she was supposed to be waiting. "Where is she?" Carol shouted, looking at the screens. "Checking all the cameras," the technician said quickly. She's not anywhere in the house." "What do you mean she's not anywhere? A 4-year-old doesn't just disappear." It was then that a familiar voice echoed through the operations communication system. It was Isabella, speaking through one of the agent's radios. "Hello! Hello! Good police officers, can you hear me?" "Isabella!" Carol shouted. "Where are you?" "I'm in a safe place, Mommy Carol, but I saw some bad men approaching the house. They had big guns." Agent Costa grabbed the radio. "Isabella, how did you get out of the house? The agents were supposed to be protecting you." "The agents were sleeping. I think someone put something in their food. They didn't wake up when I called them." A terrible realization dawned on everyone in the command center. The criminals had managed to drug the agents protecting Isabella. "My dear, where are you now?" Zuleika asked over the radio. "I'm hiding in a neighbor's house. The lady who lives here let me in. She said she's going to help me." "What lady?" "I don't know her name. She's an old lady and wears glasses. She said she saw the bad men coming and called me to come here." At that moment, an explosion shook the command center, causing everyone to throw themselves to the ground. Part of the ceiling collapsed, and smoke began to fill the room. "They're trying to force us out," Agent Costa said, coughing because of the smoke. "We need to evacuate." "And go where?" Victor asked. "There are 20 killers waiting for us outside." It was then that Isabella's voice came back over the radio, but now she sounded different, more determined, more mature than a 4-year-old should sound. "Good police officers, I know how you can get out of there." "How, my dear?" Agent Costa asked. "I can see the building from where I'm hiding. The bad men are all on the front and right side, but the left side is empty. There's a small door in the back that they're not watching. How can you see this so accurately? Because I count them. There are 23 bad men, 12 in the front, 7 on the right side, 4 in the cars, none on the left side." Isabella's ability for observation and rapid calculation was saving her family's life. "Isabella," Agent Costa said urgently, "can you continue to inform us about their movements?" "I can. But there's one thing you need to know." "What is it?" "The man who is commanding the others, I recognize his voice." "From where?" "From the dark place. It's the man that the lady in white called Boss. He visited the dark place sometimes and talked about special children." A chill ran through everyone in the command center. Isabella was face to face with someone directly responsible for her past trauma. "My dear," Carol said over the radio, "are you scared?" I was. But now I'm not anymore. Why? Because now I understand that the bad men only have power when people are afraid of them. And I'm not afraid anymore. Following Isabella's instructions, the group managed to evacuate the command center through the back door. The 4-year-old girl continued to provide accurate information about the criminal's location, guiding her family to safety with an efficiency that impressed the federal agents. "Now they are moving," she reported over the radio. 8 of them entered the building. The others remain outside. "That means we have fewer people to face outside," Agent Costa observed. "Isabella," Victor said over the radio, "where are you going to meet us?" "The lady who helped me said she knows a safe place, an old church that's 3 blocks from here. She said the priest will help us." 20 minutes later, in a small and dimly lit church, the family finally reunited. Isabella ran into the arms of Carol, Victor and Zuleika, who hugged her as if they never wanted to let her go. "My warrior," Carol murmured, kissing the top of her head. "You saved all of our lives." "I just did what you taught me," Isabella replied. "That when someone we love is in danger, we do anything to protect them." The church priest, an elderly man named Father Miguel, had prepared a hiding place in the church basement. "You can stay here until the situation is resolved," he said. "This church has been a sanctuary for over 100 years. No evil will enter here." But even in the relative safety of the church, everyone knew that the situation had not yet been resolved. The criminals had discovered that the operation was a trap, had neutralized the agents protecting Isabella, and had enough resources to mount a coordinated attack against a federal operation. "They won't give up," Agent Costa said, checking his communication equipment. "They'll keep looking until they find us." "And then what?" Zuleika asked. "Are we going to spend the rest of our lives hiding in churches?" It was Isabella who answered, with a wisdom that seemed impossible for her age. "We're not going to hide forever." "Because I discovered something important today." "What was it, my dear?" "I discovered that when good people come together to fight bad people, the good people always win. It just takes a little longer sometimes." Looking at that extraordinary girl who had gone from victim to heroine in a matter of months, the whole family understood that she was right. The battle was not over, but they were no longer running. Now they were preparing for the final showdown. 3 months had passed since that night in the church, and the world had completely changed for the Collins Silver family. What none of them expected was that the solution to their problems would come from a completely unexpected source: Isabella's own determination to end that situation once and for all. During the weeks following the failed attack, the federal investigations had progressed dramatically. With the information provided by Danny and other repentant members of the network, the authorities were able to map the entire criminal organization, which spanned 5 countries and involved hundreds of people. But the most important thing had been the discovery made by Isabella on a random morning, while playing with some documents that the agents had left on the table. "Uncle Agent," she said to Agent Costa, "these numbers here are wrong." "What numbers, Isabella?" "The numbers of the bad men's bank accounts. There's a hidden pattern here that shows where they keep all the money." The agent looked at the documents that Isabella was examining. They were complex financial spreadsheets that a team of experts had analyzed for weeks without finding anything conclusive. "What are you seeing that we didn't see?" "Look," Isabella said, picking up a pencil with her little hand and beginning to circle seemingly random numbers. "If you take the 3rd number from each account, then the 7th, then the 5th, and do that on all the accounts, they form coordinates." "Coordinates of what?" "Of where they hid the money. It's a very smart code, but it's not that difficult to understand. 2 hours later, a team of financial crimes experts confirmed that Isabella was right. The numbers really formed geographical coordinates of banks in tax havens where the organization kept its main accounts. With this information, Agent Costa explained to the family, we can freeze all the organization's accounts. Without money, they can't pay operators, they can't bribe authorities, they can't function. And that will really end them? Carol asked. It will break the backbone of the operation. Without financial resources, the whole network will collapse. That was exactly what happened. During the following 2 weeks, coordinated operations in 5 countries froze more than $50 million in criminal accounts, arrested dozens of operators, and rescued more than 100 children who were being exploited. Danny, who had become an official informant, provided details that allowed them to locate Director Regina herself, hidden on a farm in upstate New York. When she was arrested, she was carrying a list with the names of over 500 children who had passed through the system over the years. It's one of the largest operations against child exploitation in the history of Latin America, declared the Attorney General at a press conference, and it all started with the courage of an ordinary family who refused to accept injustice. But the real end of the story didn't happen in the courts or in the newspaper headlines. It happened on a sunny Sunday afternoon, 6 months later, in a new house in Albany, where the family could finally live in safety. Victor had sold the factory in Harmony Creek and started a new company, specializing in educational furniture for schools and daycares. Carol had gone back to school and was graduating in child psychology, determined to help other traumatized children. And Zuleika had moved to a house on the same street, working as a freelance seamstress, but spending every day with her daughter. Isabella, now 5 years old, attended a regular school where she was a brilliant student, but mainly a happy child. Her drawings had changed again. Now she showed large, united families, colorful houses with flowering gardens, and always, always birds flying free in the blue sky. "Daddy Victor," she said one afternoon while doing homework at the kitchen table, "can I ask you a question?" "Of course, my little flower. Do you regret helping me that day in the square?" The question caught Victor off guard. He stopped washing the dishes and turned to look at his daughter. "Why are you asking that?" Because of me, you went through a lot of bad things. You had to run away, you were afraid, you almost got hurt." Victor dried his hands and sat next to Isabella. "Isabella, do you want to know the truth?" "I want to. Before I met you, I had a life that seemed good, but it was empty. I had money, I had a big company, I had a beautiful house, but I had no purpose. What is purpose? It's having an important reason to wake up every day. And you gave me that reason." "How so?" "You taught me that being a real man doesn't mean having a lot of money or power. It means protecting those who need protection, helping those who need help, and loving unconditionally." Isabella smiled, that radiant smile that had won hearts and changed lives. "And I also learned something important from you." "What was it?" "I learned that family isn't just who has the same blood as you. Family is who chooses to stay by your side even when it's dangerous." At that moment, Carol and Zuleika entered the kitchen, returning from the market, loaded with bags and laughing about some conversation they had had along the way. "What are you talking about?" Carol asked, kissing Isabella's forehead. "We were talking about family," Isabella replied. "Oh, yeah? And what was the conclusion? That we are the best family in the whole world," Isabella said, hugging Carol first, then running to hug Zuleika. "Even though it's a strange family," Zuleika joked, "with 2 mums and 2 dads. "Especially for being a strange family," Isabella laughed. "Normal families are boring. Strange families are more fun." That night, after Isabella fell asleep in her bed, in her own room, in her own house, without fear of bad men or dark places, the 4 adults sat on the porch to talk about the future. "We received a letter today," Victor said, pulling an envelope from his pocket. From Annie, one of the children who were rescued from the farm. What did she write? Carol asked. Victor read the letter aloud. Dear Isabella, my name is Annie, and I was in the dark place with you. Now I live with a very good family in São Paulo, and I go to school every day. My new mom told me that you helped the police save us. I wanted to say thank you. I draw birds too now, just like you taught me. I hope you're happy. Your friend, Annie. She remembers you, Zuleika said to Isabella, who had woken up and come down quietly to get a glass of water. Of course, I remember Annie. She was very brave. She always shared her food with me when I was very hungry. And now you're both free, Carol observed. All the children are free, Isabella corrected. And that's the most important thing. A year later, at an official ceremony in Albany, Isabella received a Medal of Civil Courage from the federal government. At age 6, she became the youngest person in the country's history to receive such an honor. During the speech, when asked what she wanted to say to other children who might be going through difficult situations, Isabella approached the microphone and said, I want to say don't be afraid to ask for help. And I want to say to the adults that sometimes children know important things, and you should listen to us. And mainly, I want to say that even when things are very bad, there can always be a family that will really love you. After the ceremony, back home, Isabella asked a question that perfectly summarized the whole journey they had lived. Daddy Victor, do you think that if I hadn't run away from the dark place that day, none of this would have happened? It's possible, he replied. But you know what I think? What? I think you didn't run away by chance. I think you ran away exactly to get to us, and so that we could all save the other children. As if it were destiny, as if it were love, finding a way to make the right things happen. Isabella thought about it for a moment, swinging her little legs in the car seat. So does that mean that all the bad things that happened were so that very, very bigger good things could happen? Exactly. I like that explanation, she said, smiling. It means that even when we're scared, we can have hope. And so a girl who had once been just a number on a list of exploited children who had slept under bridges and begged for scraps of bread became a symbol that true love can overcome any evil, and that families can be formed not only by blood, but by the deliberate choice to love unconditionally. Isabella grew up to become a brilliant mathematician, using her special skills to help organizations that combat financial crimes around the world. But more importantly than that, she grew up surrounded by the love of 4 adults who proved that when good people come together with a common purpose, there is no force in the world that can stop them. And every night, before falling asleep in her safe bed, in her house full of love, Isabella drew a special bird, a bird that flew not to escape something bad, but to bring hope to all the children in the world who still needed someone to choose to love them. Because that had been the greatest lesson of her entire journey. Love is not something that simply happens. It is something we choose to make happen every day, regardless of the price we have to pay for it.